It's a milestone for all of us. And of course, back in 1945, India was not even independent then and has been an original founding member. Of course, we recognized the realities of the world at that time and made a UN system in a particular way. And that political consensus of that world order is today breaking down. When we cannot find solutions inside the United Nations, then the Security Council is helpless. If the General Assembly shouts and Security Council cannot listen, then of course all these kinds of problems which are arising in the world, we are today seeing the world is being fragmented. But we know that as we realized in 1945 that there is only one planet on which we can live, and there is only one platform where we can all get together. So UN, of course, would continue to be relevant all the time because we have no other option, but we have to revitalize it. And today, to rise up to those challenges, when we see that even the major actors who had upheld the UN principles, who had made a solemn oath, today the world trade order is breaking down. There's international rules are being flouted. Even if the UN passes a resolution, that is also not being listened to. And when the wars are happening in many parts of the world, it's not only Europe or the Middle East. There are many other parts of the world where they are having hotspots and we don't even have headlines for them. Then we see that there's a serious challenge today facing the United Nations. But we have to revitalize, we have to come together. And as we say, India also says that UN must reflect the system, the current realities of the world order. The world GDP growth rates have been shifting. The largest populations are coming from somewhere. Some people don't have voices in the United Nations. And we also forget the historical injustice, which was meted out to Africa. They were not even remembered. And I would just say that even during India's G20 presidency 2 years back, India brought this idea, and finally we got it, that Africa would be permanently represented in the G20. So in a smaller platform, we are able to do it. On a larger platform, how do we do it? That is a challenge. We all have to come together. We have to see that how we take this combined steps forward, and then only UN can become relevant. We have so many challenges in the world today. There is the crisis of food, crisis of nutrition, crisis of security. We saw when the pandemic broke down, there are many major countries in the world just closed their borders. And there was also a hoarding of vaccines and implements which would save your lives. At that time, who was thinking of all the deprived people of the world? And we have to come together. So I would say that values are universal, but they tend to break down if we don't reaffirm them every day. And by our practices every day, we have to find those values again and again. And if we don't do that, then of course there's a great problem that we will just slip back on that. So we should all come together and reflect that how we can make UN more universal, more representatives of the today's world order, and that is the only way we can go forward.
Dion, yes. A round of applause. Thank you. And beyond the way to go forward, we hear here, your research has kind of traced the concept of development from aid and reconstruction to sustainability and governance. How has this changing roles of the UN, as we just heard mentioned here, shaped global ideas of progress and solidarity?
Yeah, well, it's shaped them immensely, I think. I mean, to me, it's 80 years of insisting on matters and issues that too easily fall off the radars of individual nation states. I mean, inequality, discrimination, rights, opportunity, dignity. For me, that's an immense way of shaping how we think about and have worked on progress and solidarity. And at 80 years, it's a big celebration, and congratulations to all. And it is a big celebration, and I feel like bringing two big words maybe to talk a little bit about these things. And one is inevitability, and the other one is political agency. Because, I think in many ways, maybe the strongest impact of the UN over the years has been its refusal of inevitability. So inevitability meaning here that things cannot change, that we are on paths that cannot be changed. To me, that's extremely strong, and it's been this call constantly and a reminder of the importance of political agency, that it's in our hands, that things can actually be changed. You can call it naive, you can call it idealist, but you can also call it aspirational, you can call it transformative, you can call it courageous, and to me that's a key voice. I mean, if we think about multilateralism today, I think it's important to say that is it inevitable that we move into a future that is post-aid? No, it's not inevitable. It's a political choice. It's political agency. Is it inevitable that we move into a future of diminished multilateralism? No, it's not inevitable. It's a political choice. So for me, that insistence on the fundamental political agency of states, also of organizations to change things, that's maybe the strongest takeaway I take from the work of the UN.
As we celebrate 80 years, we also, of course, frame the question how the UN actually makes itself ready for the next 80 years. And there is pressure. You mentioned it at all, and the, let's say, the demand of reforms. We talked about Hammarskjöld and his mission about saving, preventing humanity from hell. But when you talk to critics, you would say, well, the UN did not prevent mankind from hell. We have seen armed conflicts, genocides, because of lack of empowerment and of mandate. So what would you say to critics who say, well, the UN and that vision and mission actually only lives on paper?
We should not forget that even when around the globe, when there are corners where there is no hope, even there, UN has the only reach. And it is the UN workers who are putting their lives at risk, working for all of us, not only for just the organization, but for the entire humanity. And as I can say also, that there's a very popular saying in India, that if there is somewhere heaven, then we should bring it to the earth. And that is what UN can aspire to do. I think that let's not undermine all the efforts which UN is undertaking. We know that this is the organization which provides hope for all of us. Of course, reforms are needed, and we can all talk about it. There is problems of funding, etc. Smaller countries, other countries have been very sincere. There are some of the big players are, showing different kinds of cards now they hold. Let's not go into that. But I think that going together, talking about it, there are many ideas on the table, and Secretary General has recently been undertaking a lot of reviews. We can do, as it was being said, that a leaner, thing, multiplicity of mandates can be avoided. We can pool our resources together, and we can think that there is a lot of overlapping things which are going into different kinds of mandates. Let's focus on the basics where we haven't still reached. That is food security, nutritional security, and political freedom. Which should, which is just we cannot compromise on that. And let's also say that sometimes these ideas look very large, and we come to we accept them that as they are. Even when we are talking of decolonization in 1960s, in 1960 was the Committee on Decolonization. We are talking of decolonization with terms and conditions. Can you imagine that? That we were talking of terms and conditions to decolonize people. So these look very fancy ideas now, and universally accepted ideas now. So there's a whole history of struggle which goes behind that. Let's not give up hope. We will continue to get on that path.
Let's not give up hope, Mette. What do you say to the critics with that frame of questions?
No, I think it's excellent put. Let's not give up hope. If we give up hope, where will the world end? I think that the challenge really is for all of us, for the UN and for the rest of us, is to bridge these global commitments and principles with the local realities that we face. You mentioned the food challenges, the health challenges and all that, but it's also how do we actually put the global commitments into the local realities and making sure that rights is not just something we declare, but that it's also something that is actually delivered and upheld in reality. And I thought about examples of what could it look like, what are we thinking about when we talk about the transmission of the global principles into concrete actions. And we all know it's about accountability and recent examples of how the system is working. We saw earlier this year the arrest of the former Philippine President Duterte for crimes against humanity. It shows how global norms can have concrete, real-world consequences that we have this arrest. I think also that the groundwork was laid nationally by the Philippine National Human Rights Institution that was documenting the violations that have been supporting the victims, and also then interacted with the UN mechanisms. So the point is, you need individual change makers, you need national systems, and you need principled international cooperation to bring this together.
Thank you, Mel. Time is rushing. Adam, lately we've seen big donors, like the US and other major donors, reduce funding levels, and that will of course impact development, humanitarian response, and operational capacity. So I think the message from the US, where I used to cover American politics, is like the UN has become too big. We want a more focused UN. So has the UN become too big? And in the affirmative, how do we right-size the UN?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to echo some of the things that had already been said in terms of saying, I mean, I'm not such a big fan of right-sizing, but I'm also a big fan of core business, right? So I think absolutely, I mean, we can talk about the importance of member states and of member states shaping the UN, but we also have to maybe then get back to my first point on inevitability and say that, you know, the development organizationally, operationally of the UN is not on an inevitable path either. So of course we've seen over time, you know, mission creep, we've seen, you know, many things, increasing competition in the UN system, and we have to deal with those, and the UN is also afforded an agency, I think, to a certain extent, to also look at those. I would hate for a situation to emerge over the coming months and years in which it would be a financial, or the finances by themselves would be a driver of where the UN goes. I think we need a much greater push for a holistic kind of strategic view in terms of how the UN can deliver, and there is an agency to actually change that, and it doesn't need to only be the financial body language of donors that decides exactly where the UN goes.
So I'm going to be like all Mrs. Nushi now because time is running, but I'd like to leave the audience with a question to you. And if you should name just one thing that symbolizes unfinished work, one thing that symbolizes unfinished work of the UN, you can only say one. What would that be? Mr. Ambassador.
I would say that we are still to achieve a nuclear weapons-free world. And let's not forget disarmament. We have to get there. It's a threat to our entire existence. In the multiplicity of other issues, sometimes we forget that. But India brings that resolution every year, and hopefully one day we would achieve that.
Thank you. Mette.
Well, the founding mission of the UN was to ensure the universality and equality between countries and between people, putting human rights at the heart of international cooperation. I think a lot has been achieved, and the world is a much better place today than it was 80 years ago, not least due to the UN. But if there is unfinished business, and if there is a big challenge to tackle, I think it is to stand firm against transactionalism, the bilateral deals that always favors the strong. I mean, in the foundation speech, I think the minister quoted the San Francisco conference, working against a world where might makes right. The ambition was to turn it around to ensure that rights have might, rights have might instead of rights might makes right. And I think there is still some unfinished business to be done there.
Alan, you got the last word.
I think, to me, in addition to what has been said, it's about really, you know, reflecting a truly multipolar world. That's what I would say. When we talk about multipolarity, it sends a shiver down the spine of European leaders. I mean, with good reason. When we consider the future of Europe politically, demographically, economically. So obviously, there are also, on the other hand, I think for many countries, an emancipatory potential in the multipolarity that we will hopefully step into. So I think navigating the world between those polar reactions to what we are stepping into is something that's going to be a crucial role for the UN.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now let's head